allow us the opportunity to share Blackbird with you all. So give me some thumbs ups or something if my screen sharing is going appropriately. All right, fantastic. If the resolution at any point in this presentation is hard to see or follow along with, please feel free to put that in the chat. Otherwise, I'll be looking at my presentation notes and my screen, and maybe Bob can unmute himself and holler at me. But really, I wanted to spend time today talking about Blackbird through the lens of creating a coding elective at your site. Hopefully, you are thinking about coding in your classroom, you're doing coding in your classroom, or wondering about ways to get it started or ways to improve what you're currently doing. So that is what we'll be talking about today. Bob is here with us. Bob is our outreach and sales representative. Bob has really been the person to get this whole webinar going. So Bob, thank you so much for everything that you've done. Thank you, Kate and CSTA, for the opportunity. Bob is going to be answering questions in the chat this afternoon and evening as I do the presentation. If he's able to answer your question, he's going to do that right then. Otherwise, he's going to record it for me. I'm going to dedicate a chunk of time at the end of this hour really to talk with you all, to answer your questions, to hear comments, concerns about what I presented on during the presentation. And before I dive into all of these things that you should do in your classroom, I thought it was important for me to give you a little bit of background about who I am. So I currently serve as the education director here at Blackbird, but before I joined the team 3 years ago, I was a high school science classroom teacher. I taught at a public high school in Central Coast, California, and I made a move about 3 years ago from the Central Coast of California to Portland, Oregon. And in that transition, I joined the Blackbird team. At that time, the Blackbird team had 2 people on board, and those were 2 very technically savvy folks who had a goal of creating an educational tool that would make learning text-based coding easier for students, because it has not been an easy thing to tackle. And these 2 folks had an idea about how they could improve it. But they didn't have any educational background. They weren't teachers themselves. They had just known the process that they had gone through and had a desire to improve it. So they really liked that I had an educational background. And they also liked that I didn't know a lick of programming. I didn't know anything at all. They wanted that perspective of what is it to learn this skill from nothing. And if we bring on someone with an educational background, an instructional background, they can help make the learning experience that much more authentic. So that's what I've been up to for the last 3 years. I've been developing learning activities for Blackbird. So all of the lessons, the guided projects, all of the content that I'll show you today or that you'll experience on your own is the work that I've done in collaboration with the team here. Once that first preliminary set of learning activities were put in place, I had the great honor of guest teaching some programming classes here in the Portland metro area and in several different classrooms in middle schools and in high schools. So I was able to go into classrooms and work alongside teachers who wanted to either create a brand new elective, like at the middle school level, or who wanted to bolster their programming offerings at the high school level. So I was able to work in both of those realms, and I've been doing that work for the last couple of years, which has been really fantastic. In my paper and pencil brick and mortar science classroom, if I developed some curriculum with my colleagues, I had 3, 4, maybe 5 shots at going through that unit that year with the different periods in my class. And then I had to jot down some notes about how it went, shelf it for a year, and then try it the following year. That was about as many repetitions as I got. But in this role with Blackbird, I've been able to see dozens and dozens of implementations in a very short time and be able to iterate and make changes to the platform, which has been really, really cool. And when I'm not teaching in the classroom, I'm supporting teachers that are in the classroom using Blackbird. I'm happy to say that from this team of 2, we've grown into a team of 6, and from just a couple of pilot classrooms, we've grown to over 30 teachers using Blackbird around the country. And I hope today what I'm able to show you might make that number grow just a little bit more. I wanted to give you a quick outline about what we'll be talking about today, so you're not guessing what's coming next. Before I show you the platform, I think it's important for me to make my best case for why teaching this particular type of computer programming is a worthwhile endeavor at your school. So I'm going to make a case for text-based programming. And then I'll show you what learning with Blackbird looks like and sort of my thought processes around why we teach the way that we do. And then what teaching with Blackbird looks like. So the tools that teachers have access to and the way that teachers really play an integral role in their students accessing Blackbird. And then figured I would show you what a typical day in one of my coding classes look like. These coding classes, of course, are ones that are at the heart are Blackbird. So how do I use this tool to flesh out an entire class? And then how can you get started? And of course, some Q&A at the end. All right, so here is my case for why text-based coding matters in the year 2021. And I want to start with a statistic. In 2019, 84% of the highest paying US companies were tech companies. Big tech, making lots of money, not a surprise to me. 84% of the highest paying companies, so I think this was a study done by Glassdoor, top 25 companies, of them, 84% of them were tech companies. So that number surprised me. And within those tech companies, and this is really the kicker, the highest paying positions, so the job that any one individual had, were all technical jobs outside of CEO, were technical jobs. They were people sitting at computers for the most part, doing technical tasks that they had learned. So really, these are folks who have learned to attend to the complexity and precision required to do that type of work. And notice I said folks who have learned to attend to complexity and precision, not folks who have earned a PhD. Because I believe that the skills, I know the skills that these folks employ on a day-to-day basis, students can start exploring those skills now, today. We are living in a world where a senior in high school might decide to skip college because they're being offered $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year internship at a big tech company because of the programming skills that they've been able to display to companies and businesses. So I really think that text-based coding is the key to unlocking the levels of complexity and precision required to attend to these jobs. And I'm going to show you a screenshot. It might scare you, but here it is. So brace yourselves. This is an integrated development environment, or an IDE. And maybe you're familiar with this. Maybe you've worked with these before. Maybe they're even a part of your coding class. But this is a tool built by engineers for engineers. And you'll notice it looks like about 30 lines of code of a much larger program. And every single line has text on it. Every computer program that we know and use, this Zoom call and the Google presentation that I'm using and everything else, has been built on a system similar to this to type the code and to make this program run. These are big, complex, unfriendly pieces of software that allow engineers to engineer more software solutions. And unfortunately, these are the types of tools that a lot of teachers at the high school level will employ when trying to teach young folks how to do text-based coding. I think, and we at Blackbird think, that is a step too far, particularly if those students have been using things like block-based, graphic-oriented learning tools like Scratch, which are wonderful ways of introducing programming to students. But to go from Scratch, a web-based application where you drag, drop, and play, into an environment like this to learn how to do text-based coding is too much. So Blackbird has been created as a bridge from those graphics tools into these text-based tools. And without any further ado, I'd like to show that to you. So I'm going to tab over here and show you the learning experience. So we're going to put on our learner hats, our student hats here for this part. And I just want to make sure that I tabbed over. Now you guys are seeing the homepage of Blackbird. Is that correct? All right, cool. So I wanted to bring you here because the temptation is to just click and log in, but there's actually a lot of cool resources here on this page. If you haven't, and I'm at blackbirdcode.com, by the way. And if you haven't created a free account, please do so now or after this presentation, whenever you like. Everything is accessible to teachers. You can see all of the lessons. You can do all of the things within Blackbird. So you can sign up here. But the other resources I was describing, you can learn all about our curriculum. So what your students will actually do. I'll show you a little bit of that, but if you want to dive deeper, you can do that. And then I'm also going to talk about a professional development opportunity that I'll be leading this summer. If you do decide to move forward with Blackbird, this is a 4-day professional development opportunity where we'll chum it up and learn all the ins and outs of Blackbird, and you'll brush up on your programming skills as well. So that is available there. But let's go ahead and log in. So this login page will show you 3 different ways that you and your students can log into the system. We're synced up with Google Single Sign-On. So if your district uses Google accounts, they can just click that. If you are integrated with Clever, then you can import your class rosters and your students can sign in with Clever, or you can use emails and passwords, do it the old-fashioned way. So I'm going to do it that way. And I'm going to log in to a teacher account. And you'll notice, boom, I'm dumped right into the middle of a lesson. And this is by design, because when students log in, we don't want them to get lost in the homepage, in anything else. We want them to go right back to the last learning activity that they were doing. But I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to move over here to the navigation, and I'm going to head to the home page just to give you a lay of the land. So this is my home page. We have 10 stages on Blackbird. And so a stage is a cluster of lessons that conclude in a challenge or a test. And this challenge is a performative assessment, to use the lingo correctly. It's not a multiple choice test or anything like that. It's, can you create this program by following these steps? And I'll show you what I mean. But it's a collection of lessons, about 13 or so different learning activities, and we've split them into 10. And so a student has finished our curriculum after they've finished stage 10, which by all estimations and usage data is about 2 semesters at the middle school level, or a semester at the high school level for freshmen, juniors, or freshman, sophomore levels. They move a little bit quicker. So a lot of learning to be done here. It'll also break down for you the time that you personally have spent on the platform. And so both this progression here and the learning time this week is individual to the teacher, because we really believe that teachers learning right alongside students we have the best outcomes with teachers who engage that way. So the ones that are doing the lessons, doing the projects, are best able to help their students move through. We've got some snazzy buttons here that will take you to different parts of the platform. Continue takes you back to that last lesson that you were working on. Guided projects, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about. We've tried to make this button as enticing as humanly possible to click. Don't you want to click that button and go try a guided project? And then the workshop is another space that I'll talk about. And then here, I'll talk more also about this classes organization piece when I move into the teaching with Blackbird part. Okay, so if you are a learner on Blackbird, then lessons is where you'll spend the first chunk of your time when you first encounter Blackbird. So here you can see all 10 stages broken into 2 curricular units. Unit 1 is typically done in about a semester at the middle school level, and teachers will typically pause there and do Unit 1 as one big chunk. But the first lesson that you'll do is here in stage 1. So let's take a look at what a lesson looks like. Well, let's take a look at this, the intro to this stage first. So every stage will begin with a little bit about what you're going to learn about in that stage. And here, this has a small blurb, but it has an interactive application too, because students are going to be learning all about this Canvas space. So we ask them to just stop and play for a little bit and make some observations, create a few points and notice what they do. Draw a line and notice what you're seeing on the screen. And so the first stage is all about this space. So students are becoming familiar with these coordinate pairs and what they mean, about this canvas width and what it means, and the canvas height and what that means. And that's all stage 1. And that's the intro. So when they click continue there, they'll be taken to, my account's all messed up. They'll be taken to lesson 1.1, where they'll see this screen. And all lessons look just about the same. There's a middle portion that has the learning task, and there is this integrated development environment, like that snapshot that I showed you, except it's a lot easier to use. So this lesson 1.1 is broken into 8 small learning tasks, and it tells us that we're going to learn how to draw a point. And you'll notice these blue links, and if I mouse over one of those blue links, it gives me a little reminder. So in this very first lesson, it's your first time coding, you don't know what a point is, you don't know how to create one, what's a computer program, I just got started. So we give you a small snippet here, but in later lessons, students will be asked to recall how to write a point. And if they don't remember off the top of their head, they can use these mouse over links. And if teachers want students to dive deeper and understand a little bit more about what a point is in terms of Blackbird and this canvas, they can click on these links and be taken to our in-app documentation. So the docs here is this sort of the baked-in textbook for Blackbird. And you'll notice that it popped out of a little drawer here. So I haven't been taken to a different page. I don't have to toggle tabs or anything like that. I'm free to explore these ideas in the context of this lesson. And then when I'm ready to return to the lesson, I can just click that drawer and my docs go away. So there's no cost to students diving into docs. I would often hear in the classroom, I don't want to get out my binder and look at my notes. It's a big hassle. Can't you just tell me the thing? And here it's really easy to just click on the docs and see the info that they need. Okay, so we've broken this lesson down, or this task, into 2 steps. The first is to create a new point, and here's how. So students get right away into typing. So this is the first lesson. They've been on the platform for just a second or 2, and they're already typing code. And they look at the little code snippet that they've been given, and they give it a shot. And they're taken to line 4 because it's the only line that they can edit. And so line 4 was the only thing that they could do. And I've made a mistake. And right away, I get a little feedback. It highlights what I've done wrong. It says point needs to be capitalized. Okay, so now I'll do a capital P. I think I've corrected my code, and it tells me to click the check code button when I'm ready. So I'm going to press check code, and I did it. I finished my first coding task on Blackbird. I've been taken to the next task. I've been told, nice work. And now if you look at my computer program that I'm building here in the editor, line 4 is saved. I can't edit it. So if I try to do that, it gives me a little warning. It says you can't edit that line. And I'm directed then to line 6. So the learning experience on Blackbird in these lessons is incredibly scaffolded. We want students to build model lessons through practice, but we don't want them to get stuck, and we don't want them to get frustrated. So one of the things that we've built into these lessons is a show me. So let me show you how that works. So for this task, it says position the x coordinate of our point. They've never done that. So here's how you do it. P.x equals that number. And then it tells me what it's going to do. It's going to position it 100 pixels from the left, and that I should check my code when I'm done. So I check my code and I get a slightly different error. It says my code isn't quite right. So that means what the student put in wasn't what the system was expecting to see. So it says I can use this show me button to figure it out. So I've typed this code. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. The show me here, when I click it, will pull out this other drawer and it's going to say, here's the code that you typed. And here's the correct code that we were looking for. And then it will highlight the differences between the two. I left out a 0. So I can go over here and add my 0 and check my code and move on. So what could have been potentially frustrating, I'm not seeing the difference, I'm not really sure what's going on, is quickly resolved by this show me feature. And this show me feature is embedded in every lesson, instructional lesson that we give students outside of the challenge lesson at the end of the stage. So in order for students to progress from one stage to the next, they have to demonstrate their understanding of the concepts that were taught, and they have to complete a lesson without the help of that show me. But while they need that help, it's there for them and it's easily accessible. So let's, I'll do a couple more tasks here so I can show you how students run programs. So here it asks me to do that. And so slowly through these tasks, I'm creating a point, and now I'm finally going to do something with my program. I'm going to draw this point on the canvas. So now that I check my code, the lesson prompts me to run it. And so these run and debug buttons are always available to students. They can always run their program when they're in progress, and they can always debug their program whenever they want. But at particular times, we're going to prompt the student to, hey, now is the time you actually have to run it. So when we click run, we'll see that our point is drawn on our canvas, but we'll also have these blurbs that pop up that tell students what they should be on the lookout for. So sometimes this is like, hey, don't miss this point that just got drawn on the canvas. And other times it's instructing them to do particular behaviors while the program is running. Because in later lessons, we're using something called the animate function, where things are happening within the program and we want students to engage with that program in a particular way. So these run mode blurbs are really, really helpful. I mentioned debug mode, so before I move into the next part, I would like to show you that. Students can press debug whenever they want, and debug, unlike run will go through an entire program and output whatever the program is. Debug is going to move through a program one line at a time. So we've entered into run mode, but the program isn't running yet. I have to step line by line through this program to see its effects. So there on line 4, I make my new point here, and now I step past line 6 and I see that I've recorded an X coordinate, and I step past line 8 and I see I have a Y coordinate, and I step one last time and I see the point drawn on the canvas. So this is a really helpful tool to show students the sequence that computers go through when they're following computer programs. It's also really helpful when students get to more complex programming ideas like loops, where these things are happening thousands of times every second, and there's no possible way that you could observe it happening, so you'd have to slow it down, and you can step through this, and it's a really powerful way of students uncovering their own mistakes that they've made with programs, or to illustrate teachable moments with students about how those things work. Certain lessons within this curriculum will actually require students to move into debug mode and go line by line. And as they do, our platform will give them little narratives about, like, here's what's happening on this line, and here's what's happening on that line. Now run it a little bit, now pause it and go through. So we really walk students through that. One last thing that I wanted to highlight on our lesson delivery system here, is our deep dive button. So we recognize that the biggest obstacle to overcome in teaching text-based coding is complexity. Every line of code is its own complex little ecosystem, using symbols and modifiers and using notation correctly is complex. So we don't want our website to feel overwhelming to students. So we've put explanatory information under this deep dive button. And so if students click it, now more explanation about what they're doing in that task comes up. But sometimes this explanation gets long and we don't want to overwhelm students before they've even gotten started. So we've put it here in the deep dive section. So this is something that I always point teachers to and say, teachers, be sure you're letting your students know this exists and you're encouraging them to click it when they're saying that they're feeling stuck. So students complete lessons, and as they complete lessons, they earn stars if they don't use the show me button. So stars are our in-app currency, if you will. It's kind of how we've gamified the system. And stars go toward earning avatars and unlocking avatars on the system. Even before students unlocked avatars with stars, stars were an incentive for a tremendous amount of students. There's just something about collecting things that's really encouraging. So we have the ability to restart lessons, so students can earn another star. They can earn up to 3 on any given lesson because we want students practicing. But they will move through this sequence of lessons, earning stars, completing lessons, until they have unlocked the stage challenge. And they'll do that by completing the first 5 lessons, which are mandatory. And then they have all of these other lessons here that they can choose to participate in. And when they pass this challenge lesson, they'll unlock the next stage. So some of the optional lessons, these practice lessons, look just like the teaching lessons, just different, same concepts, different context. The review lesson attempts to take all of the concepts and smush it into one program. The vocabulary quizzes are pretty neat. I'm going to retry this quiz. They're just multiple choice quizzes for new terms that have been introduced. So these are created by positioning 2 sets of coordinate on the canvas. Coordinates, oh, not quite, lines. And there's a whole collection of these little vocabulary quizzes that students can participate in. They can also try puzzles, which are pretty new to the platform. All of the lessons have students creating a model computer program from scratch. Every line of code they're typing, but we also recognize that reading other people's code is a skill that programmers include as well. So these small puzzles present code that isn't quite correct, isn't quite right. And we ask students if they can solve the puzzle. And we keep these puzzles limited in scope. You can see here, there's only one line that they can change. So they don't have to go from top to bottom scouring solutions. They can try to fix these puzzles quick and see if they can get through them. And there's puzzles within every stage that we have. And then finally, when a student is feeling like they've mastered the concepts that have been introduced to them within a stage, they can try a challenge lesson. And these challenge lessons look just like the other lessons that I've shown you. The only exception is that on a student's account, they can't use the show me button. I'm on a teacher account, and we don't want to keep the answers from the teachers. So teachers can use the show me on the challenge, but students cannot. And then the deep dives here will refer students back to old lessons to review. So they can review a lesson they've already completed, or they can try one of those optional practice lessons. So in my classes, students would often do the first 5, take a stab at the challenge lesson, get stuck, and then I'd refer them back to more practice lessons. And I tell them it's totally fine to get stuck on the challenge. It's just a sign that you need a little bit more practice. So head back to those lessons and get a little bit more practice. And then once students complete this challenge lesson, they get a big window that pops up, a big congratulatory window that says, awesome, you have mastered this handful of concepts. Let's put them into practice. So lessons are these very scaffolded, very structured activities. They have these show me features. There's only one program that they're going to complete. But we know that going through those learning activities doesn't make a programmer on the other end. Students need an opportunity to make authentic mistakes and to be creative with their programs. And so the workshop is the other half of Blackbird. We have this curriculum set up to get students started, but we really want all of our learners to move into this workshop as a sign that they are picking up the concepts that are being introduced to them and are able to employ them. So when students first click on the workshop, they're taken to this guided project page. And guided projects are our attempt at taking some of the training wheels off and getting students into this workshop environment, this engineering environment, but having some supports and scaffolds for them there. So as you can see, I clicked on the workshop and I moved away from this lesson environment into this workshop environment. And immediately I'm greeted with an empty code editor. It has one blinking cursor here, and that's it. So if you told a 13-year-old student, okay, now write me a computer program, you just did these lessons, go ahead and write me one, they might look at you with a stare, or in fact, they do. So what we've done is we've put together these guided projects. So these are students' next steps from a challenge lesson. And these guided projects are a small menu of learning activities that students can create within the workshop. But they do a couple of things. First, they set a goalpost for a student. The student might not have an idea after an hour or two learning on Blackbird of a program that they want to create. They've just gotten started. So we provide that for a student. We also let them know the relative complexity of what they're trying to create. So a one feather project here, that's not going to be too different than anything that they did in their lessons. So they'll have lots of references there. Whereas a three feather project, that might be a lot different. And they're going to maybe be challenged more by a project like that. But once they've decided the level of challenge that they like, they can start it. And so now we see, instead of a blank code editor, we have a code editor full of code comments. So this gives students some relative idea of where their code should go. And then they also have instructions. So it says, in this project, here's what we're going to do. Here's what it's going to look like when you're all done. And then they have these collapsible menus with instructions that say, all right, here's our first step. Let's do this. And if a student gets here and they're like, I'm not really sure if I'm ready for that, then we have some links back to lessons where they learn these things. And we also have those helpful mouse over links as well. But you'll notice in that code editor, so they have instructions, which are very helpful, and they have code comments, but in this editor, there are no green saved lines. They're able to change all of this. They're able to delete some of these pre-baked comments. They can add lots of extra lines. They can ruin their code really great. So they can make it and they can break it here in the workshop. And that's what we want them to be doing. And if, at the end of the day that they've made a mess of their thing, they can reset their guided project, get it back to starting and try it again. So these guided projects serve as the extension from this lesson delivery environment into the workshop. But guided projects are just one part of this workshop. There is a nest of model projects that students can play with. Our own rendition of a snake game. And students love playing with these programs. They also love breaking these programs. You'll see all of the code is loaded here into the code editor. And they can come in and they can delete it and run it and realize, oops, I've done a thing. And they can just load it up again and try it again. So the nest is a really cool way for students to tinker and play. Then they can also observe the programs that their friends have made, and they can make their own. So if a student just clicks new here, they get taken back to that blank code editor. They can say, this is my first program, and they can save it. And they give it a name, and they save, and they start their own collection of authentic code that they have created. Our lessons also feed into the workshop in that if a student has created a program and within a lesson and wants to tinker with it in the workshop, instead of having to copy and paste into the workshop, we have this cool work on button here that they can press, and it'll take that code out of a lesson and slap it here in the workshop. And then they can right away just start tinkering and playing with it and save their own copy of it. My lesson 1.1. And they can save it. So that is the learning experience on Blackbird code. That's the learning progression. Guided lessons, really structured lessons into less structured guided projects. And then ultimately, and then back to the next stage, back to a guided project, to a next stage, to a guided project. And along the way, hopefully creating their own creative work within this platform. So that is the learning lens. That's what's going on here. Before I get to a typical day in class, I want to show you some of these teaching tools. So let me head back home and show you some of my classes. So I'm currently working with some students remotely in a school district just outside of Portland. The names are fake, but the student data is real here. So that class is called Programming with Mike. It's a small group, and these students have worked really hard over this last school year, and most of them these are middle schoolers, and most of them are making it towards the latter stages of the curriculum. You can see their stage progress here. You can see the time that they spent today working on the platform. You can see their overall lesson time on the system, overall workshop time, the number of stars that they've earned on lessons. I have the ability as a teacher to message a student and say, hey, you know, this assignment was due, or I noticed you haven't logged on in a couple of days, or how's it going? So you have a messaging system here. Messages in Blackbird only go between teachers and students. You don't need to worry about monitoring student interactions on the platform. And if I want to know more about what this student has done, I can click on their name, and then I get a really detailed report about the work that they've done. So this is a student who has earned lots of stars, and I can tell based on the glow that these boxes have. So stage 1 is glowing gold. That means that they have completed this stage with more than 5 stars. And in fact, the student has finished stage 1 with 40 stars. I'm not sure how many there are in stage 1, but that might be about as many as there are. So they've really gone after the stars, and they've completed all of this code. I can see how long they've spent on these lessons. So here, lesson 8.9, they've spent 44 minutes across their multiple attempts on this one lesson. So there's lots of information for me here. And then I can jump to their workshop projects as well. So I think we're ready to do that. So this is our progress monitoring page for classes. And if I want to look at the next student, I can click this arrow button here, and I can see what Angel has done. And then I can click to the next student and can see what Cortavius has done, and Jeremiah. And when I want to create a report about these students' progress, I can go to reports, and I can enter in a date range, and I can generate a report that I can export, print, share with parents, and do all those things. So let's go back to that progress page where I was showing you what those students have done. I'll click on Allison, and from here, I want to go to code review. I want to look at the projects that the student has done in the workshop. So I can click on guided projects. It's going to take me away from that page into another page called code review. So these are all of the projects that the student has created inside of the workshop. So I can see the guided projects that they've tried, and I can see that some of them have earned feathers. So let's take a look at Rainbow. If I click on Rainbow, I'll load this student, Allison's project, into my code workshop, and I can run it. And I can see that they created a program that made a rainbow on the canvas. And I would know what this code is supposed to look like because I, the teacher, have been given a solution to this guided project. And I can leave comments on this particular program, like, hey, Allison, I can add a comment, and I've already awarded 3 feathers to this student, but feathers are sort of the equivalent to a star, but for workshop work, because we know how important that work is there. So code review has been a really, really powerful tool this year for teachers teaching at a distance. Typically, you're looking over a student's shoulder and giving them pointers and helping them debug their programs. But when you can't be in the same classroom or you're at a distance, the value of this tool really, really goes up, and you can give some really close feedback. And sometimes you're not able to get to every student within a classroom setting. I was in a mixed grade middle school class with 32 students in it. All of them had their own devices and all of them were programming. And in a 55-minute period, there was no way I was going to be able to help debug every student's program. But if they sent me a message and said, hey, Mike, I'm struggling with this program, here's its name, can you give me some feedback? I could go through and identify bugs and tinker with their programs and try to get them moving in the right direction. So code review is really powerful in that way. And then last but not least, I want to highlight the resources that we've put together for teachers. So this resources button here will take you to the teacher resources page, where I've done some screen capture videos about my intention with how these things work. But below that are all sorts of documents for teachers to use. So there's a teacher prep checklist. So you've never taught with Blackbird before, where do you get started? You can click on this and it'll give you an idea of some things to do before your first day of class, after your first day of class, get you off on the right foot. Some classroom activities like a scavenger hunt. And then I'm going to talk in just a second about warm-ups, but all of my slides that I've used from teaching classes, I've put here for use for our teachers. The syllabi that I've created that have gotten adoption at district levels for this class are here as well. So if you're really just on the ground floor wondering where to start, we have some resources for you there, as well as a detailed curriculum description, and on it goes here. So that is teaching with Blackbird. And let me put all those parts and pieces together and talk to you about a typical day in class in Blackbird. So all of my classes I taught 55-minute sections for multiple classes, and then hour and 40-minute blocks for others. 55 minutes was absolutely my favorite format to teach this, because this skill, like math, the more you address it and the more you're coming back to it, the easier it is to pick up those skills. But regardless of the format, I always start a class with a warm-up. And a warm-up is a teacher-created workshop prompt for all of the students within a class. So I would always start class with a warm-up. And I would, this screen would be open as students were walking through the door or joining in digitally or at a distance. They would see this, and it's just prompts for them to access this warm-up. So it says head to the workshop and find warm-up number 1. So what they would do is within this system on their homepage, under their friends list, they would see my name, and they'd be able to click next to my name to access my warm-up. And within that warm-up, they would see a prompt. So here's a stage 1 warm-up, and this is what students would see. It says create 2 points, one at the top, another at the bottom. And so this is how we would begin. For the first 10 minutes of class, students are coming in, we're getting settled down, devices are getting opened up or turned on, and we're sort of settling into programming mode. And students are trying to recall how to do these things, trying to figure it out, talking with the person at their side or within a chat room about how to do it, accessing the docs, really just jogging their memory, getting into programming mode. And when students had finished this, they would save it. And then I, as the teacher, could go through my list of students and see who had saved this warm-up. So we won't see many examples here, but my warm-ups, that warm-up number 1 that I just showed you, would have my list of students and who had completed that warm-up. And through this menu here, I'm able to first, monitor who's completed a warm-up, but second, I'm able to pull up their code and share it with the class, which is a really, really powerful way of displaying other students' code. Because when you're in that workshop, you can do whatever you want. So students would often do the little prompt that I had for them, and they would complete that code, but then they'd often go off and add their own riff on my warm-up. And that was a really big incentive for them to say, hey, I did your warm-up, I met the criteria, and I added something else, I want to share it with the class. And I could pull up that student's code and display it and run it for the whole class to see the silly image they had uploaded to their program, or the really cool behavior that they had coded. So warm-ups were typically the first 20 minutes of class, 10 minutes for students to work, 10 minutes for me to ask for volunteers to display the code that they had created, and then an opportunity for me to highlight coding practices that these students were going through. And oftentimes I would ask students if they could explain to us how they programmed their warm-up for that day. And then after a warm-up, I would have independent study time within class. So because Blackbird is self-paced, not all of my students would be at the same place. And for example, this class here, if this was a very small class of 7, no one is on the very same lesson. So we can't move into the lesson environment as a group and move through together. So, and that's by design because everyone processes a little bit differently. So I would open up time within class for students to work on either lessons, if that's where they were at. I would pose challenges to some of them who had completed lessons and I didn't really want them to continue. I wanted them to practice what they had done. Or we would get together and create partner projects. And I have some, on the resources page, I've highlighted some partner projects that I've used before. These are called personal projects, but I'd often have students work in pairs to create them. I've included rubrics for those here on the teacher resources page as well. But that would all happen within this middle chunk of time. That would open me up to move around the class, do whatever management things I needed to do, but also check in, motivate students as needed, and help some of those students debug who were working in the workshop and wanted some help. Or I could point students to resources who were working on lessons. And then at the end of every class, when that chunk had wrapped up, the last 5 minutes or so, I'd bring everyone back together and we would end class with sort of a meta moment, a learning log, I would call them. And I would pose questions to students about a coding topic. So for example, learning log 1 here, how does a programmer place a point on the canvas in Blackbird? And I would ask students not to type me the code for how to do that, but explain it in their own words. So they're making these connections between giving instructions to me, a person, and making the connection between what they're doing with a computer giving instructions. And they would use the messaging system in Blackbird, so I as a teacher could open up my messages tab and look at all of the messages that students had sent. So in my brick and mortar classroom, I'd do this on a piece of paper, or students would do it on a piece of paper, and I'd stand at the door and collect my stack of exit tickets, and you couldn't leave until you had done an exit ticket. With Blackbird, I can do something very similar with the messaging system. And on top of that, I wouldn't ever respond to students on the little slip of paper and pass it back to them. But here on Blackbird, I can quickly reply with a message about the learning log for that day. And I would often do that at the end of class. It would take about 10 or 15 minutes to go through a group and give them all replies. So they felt like they had an open line of communication with me in this class at all times, even if they weren't comfortable talking in front of their peers during a class period. And then they would leave and we'd come back, start with a warm-up. We'd review the learning log, move into a warm-up, independent work time, and a learning log. And this pattern really worked beautifully. Every couple of weeks, we would do a partner project. Students would come up, present their programs, talk about their difficulties, and we'd move through the semester. And it was, in terms of preparation, coming from a lab science class into teaching a class like this, it was night and day. My preparation in terms of lesson prep was my learning logs and my warm-ups, and doing a little bit of grading and record keeping from time to time. But the lessons were prepared. They were there. Students had missed a day, no big sweat. Here's what the warm-up was. Here's what the learning log was. The lessons are the lessons, and they're there on Blackbird. So it was really a wonderful way of introducing this topic and approaching this huge complexity of text-based coding, doing it in a way that allowed students to be successful on their own terms, at their own pace, and allow me to really be a guide on the side for them, rather than this person that had all the knowledge and that was going to give it to them on a very regimented day-by-day basis. And so I hope that this demonstration, me talking about all of this, has got you thinking about how Blackbird could work in your classroom, or help you create a new elective at your school. I've got a couple of tips about how you can get started if you are interested. So the first would be to play. Jump on the site, stay in touch with me, try some things out. That resources tab, review those materials, see if there's things that are helpful there. Try a stage, try a guided project. If you're ready to move forward, I'd love to hear from you. sales@blackbirdcode.com. We can produce a quote for you. And I would like to remind all of you CSTA Plus members that there's no onboarding or training fees for you all. And then that summer professional development course that I had alluded to at the beginning, that's going to happen June 28th through July 1st. There'll be half-day sessions. That's a Monday through a Thursday. We're going to program together. We're going to learn all about the curriculum together. We'll talk more about those warm-ups and learning logs and ways to get students engaged and sharing their code. And without any further ado, I'd love to answer questions. I've run long. I apologize. I'm willing to stay as long as you guys would like and answer any questions that you have about Blackbird. Bob, did you catch any in the chat?
Hi, we had a few questions. Some people wanted to know. One question was, if we're doing this for middle school students, are they on the program about 2 to 3 times a week? Is it daily? How often do you see middle school or high school students on the program?
Yeah, I've always advocated a little bit every day. So it's really great when bell schedules help that happen, when you're seeing your students every day. But if you're on a block schedule and you're not seeing your students every day, I like to encourage my students to log on even just for 10 minutes. And the system allows you to monitor that too, because you can see who was on yesterday, how long were they on. You can run a report and see. So if that's something that you would like to require of your students, then it's really easy to run a report and see. We create a weekly report for teachers as well that will tell them when their students logged on and for how long. But I really think every day is the key to success there. It's really easy to learn how to program something and then walk away for a couple of days, come back and scratch your head and say, I totally forget how I did that. I'm stuck now. So more the better. That's a good question.
And of course, the really nice thing about Blackbird is that the students can work on this at home. You know, I noticed when we look at our usage reports, we have a lot of students that are working on this at home. They're exposing their brothers and sisters and family to the code. And it's really pretty exciting for them to learn with their family on those weekends.
Yeah, I could pull up some of the students from that class that I was showcasing, but there's no way all those hours were racked up in a classroom setting. Those are students that have gone off on their own and really taken to it.
Are there any language supports yet built into this, or did I miss that?
So there's those blue links to the documentation and things like that. There's no translation yet, though we do work pretty well with screen readers, I've noticed. Like the Chrome extensions will work okay. There's some funny little hiccups that'll pop up from time to time, but it's not a total disaster. So the screen readers work okay, I would say, but no translations yet.
Just want to call out, did we answer Karen's question about the fee for PD?
Well, for the PD is about $150 is the value of the PD in terms of individual teacher sign up and development. But that is waived for CSTA plus members.
Gotcha. So the workshop at the end of June to July.
Oh, that workshop.
I think that's what they're referring to with PD. Yeah.
Yeah, that PD is, I think there's a $300 fee that we're asking for that PD opportunity there. If it's something you're really interested in, that fee is going to be a barrier. We don't want that to get in the way. So please reach out, whether it's a quote for a site license or the PD. We're really interested in working with more teachers. We're just trying to keep the doors open at the same time.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because sometimes you get maybe $100 for PD or nothing for a year. Awesome.
And I could break into just a second. And our site licenses really are based on the number of teachers, the number of students, whether it's something at a Title I school, whether we're looking at something that is used for the entire year or partial year. So it's best just to send us an email so we can get a quote to you.
Yes.
But we've really been working with a variety of schools, everything from a code camp to multi-schools in a district. So.
Yeah. And I would like to take that opportunity to call out, we have a CS for All commitment. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the nonprofit CS for All, but they put out a call for commitments from businesses and organizations like ours. And our commitment for this year was to identify 5 Title I schools that we could offer our curriculum to at no cost for the 21-22 school year. So we currently have a couple of schools on that list, but if you feel like you're a good fit and you're interested in Blackbird, we would like to work with you. So please reach out to me or Bob, and we'll get you on that list, because we'd love to meet our commitment and of course work with more schools.
Jay also had a question about using the Blackbird independently of perhaps even an elective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've used Blackbird as an after-school program. We have a wraparound service here in Portland called Sun. Students get dinner and they hang out for a few hours doing things like chess club and skate club, and we did programming club, and we used Blackbird in that setting. And that was a lot of fun. You know, text-based coding is an academic topic. It's not skateboarding club. So we would break things up after school, after a whole day of academic study, and you know, we'd go take nature walks and do things like that, and talk about algorithms we saw in nature and stuff, because I had them for 3 hours, 3 times a week. So we would break it up, but absolutely, teachers are using Blackbird as a supplemental tool. So not as you know, the core curriculum of a class. They have activities that they like to use. Maybe they're longtime CS teachers who have a fleshed out curriculum, but they really like the scaffolds and the workshop and things of that nature. So yeah, we've seen it used in lots of different ways.
Any other questions you might have thinking about it? Don't forget, everyone has a free teacher account. So you know, just go ahead and log in with your email, and you can do all the lessons. You can sign a few students up to do some lessons. We've had that happen a lot where teachers will say, you know, I'd like to investigate this. I want to give it to a few of my high school kids and see what they think of it. And they could tell me, could it be done? So that's also a nice way to do it when you've got some time yet this school year, to check with some of your students who have done well on programming and to see how they jive with Blackbird.
Yeah. Maybe after state testing, they finish early. Hey, jump on Blackbird, give it a try.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I was excited to hear a little bit more about Blackbird, just because I've heard about it and we're excited to partner with them. But we'll go ahead and send up this recording next week. I encourage you to play around with the site. It sounds like you can do a lot without having to sign up for, you know, to commit to anything. But yeah, I definitely heard that you can negotiate for the upcoming PD. That's my takeaway, is advocate for members. So I heard that. And Mike is going to help with any onboarding. So that's that CSTA plus benefit is you don't have to pay for the helping in that onboarding. So I'll go ahead and follow up next week. Mike, Bob, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for joining. I really appreciate your time. And we'll be in touch. Happy to offer these little glimpses into different platforms. And we really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks everybody for the time. Really appreciate meeting you all and having the opportunity.
Yeah. All right.
Take care.
Everyone have a safe night. Thank you.